Hello, peeps. Welcome yet again to the Alex Gem Experience. This podcast is all about reaching and finding that deeper level of consciousness. So, there are diverse types of consciousness, and really the deeper we go, the more enlightened we become, the more liberated we become, the freer we become, and so on and so forth. So what's the need for me to create this podcast? This podcast is designed to end suffering. This podcast is designed to create more energy, more positivity, more enlightenment, more presence, less pain in the world and within ourselves, to enhance congruency, synchronicity within ourselves, to therefore enable us to live longer, more peacefully, more abundantly, more joyfully, more happily, and so on and so forth. So in many ways, this is quite possibly the most significant podcast we could ever fathom and create a dialogue about. So it's incredibly important to consider our level of consciousness. So we can only be peaceful and happy if our heart and our mind operate congruently. Okay, so happiness requires presence and it requires our full attention. However, interestingly or not, it does not necessarily require thought. You don't have to simply study something conceptually in order to understand it, in order to live it. We just need to feel it, really. It's more of a state of being rather than being able to rationalize and logically think things through. And I know that becomes hard for us because we want to always feel like we're in control and we can always do things. And yes, we can. And yes, we have a role to play. But things are more simpler than they seem in life. It just requires focus, astonishment, gratitude, and these sorts of beautiful, blissful states. So, yeah, certain things like positivity, visualization, and so on can make us happier and make life more easier. But it is even simpler than that. We just need to become aware of our senses. We need to gather a deeper attachment to our senses, how we feel. Like when you place your attention on your feet, for example, or your hands and so on, and you focus on the energy within these places, you might feel a kind of like a tingling sensation take over. And then that joy, that energy, that focus, that attention you put in these areas, you'll be able to slowly make your way over your entire body until your entire body is pulsing, if you will, pulsing with energy, metaphorically speaking. And that's when you truly feel alive. And then we're going to spread this inner energy to, other parts of the body, and we're going to channel our energy to the mind. And that's what enables us to stimulate gamma brainwave state. And gamma brainwave state is all about arousal, alertness, energy. It enables different parts of the brain, along with the central nervous system, to work congruently, harmoniously, the same as in enhancing the coherence between our heart and our minds. And this is what enables us to live blissfully, to have so much inner peace and so much gratitude and appreciation and love. And we have so much more energy to function throughout our lives when we encounter these kind of more blissful, beautiful states. And that's why it's so important to not just experience it, but to live there as much as you can, to be more present than usual, to not be bogged down by our egoic conditioned consciousness and just be focused on identifying with what we have and our positions and who we are, and therefore also being connected to our sense of lack, incompleteness, and therefore the suffering that ensues as a consequence of being so largely attached to our ego as our physical form, our conditioned consciousness, and so on. And this is where we stand, and this is what we need to look at. So people lose their being and the true essence of life because they take things out the wrong perspective, and like I said, they become dominated by their egoic mind, by their compulsive thinking, by their thought forms, and so on. So, if we want to feel complete and united and connected and experience that oneness, then we need to create from a different perspective, a different level, a deeper level of consciousness. And this is the meaning of what Abraham Maslow called self-actualization. It means getting to a point and creating from a source of abundance. And you can never feel abundant and feel complete and whole and loved if you are operating from the ego, because the ego always wants more. The ego is never full. And the ego rears its ugly head in so many different areas in our lives. For instance, overeating, inactivity, indulging in drama, indulging in negativity, indulging in stress and living in chronic stress, and therefore increasing all kinds of diverse consequences that derive from doing so. And our mental, emotional paradigms, patterns, addictions, yes, our thoughts are addictive, yes. 95% of our thoughts, our beliefs, our perceptions, our emotions are subconscious programs, meaning we've taught ourselves to do it so often that it becomes absolutely natural to live by these familiar states. But that could be hazardous in many ways. So we don't want to create in order to feel significant and special. We want to create from a different source, from love, from purity, from oneness, from congruency. And it does make a difference. And I'll touch upon this a bit later as well. So we are all part of this greater intelligence that exists. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to think, what to believe in, what your religious standpoints, your political standpoints need to be. Those are your choice. That's your prerogative. That's your right, and so on and so forth. But what I am here to do is to understand, when I say greater intelligence, you can call it source, you can call it God, you can call it Allah, you can call it spirituality, oneness, that deeper level of consciousness, whatever you want to refer to it as, okay? That's your choice. So we are all part of this. Now, the problem is the more we grow up, the more responsibilities we have, the more complicated we make life, the more things and people and experiences we accumulate in our life, the harder it is for us to change. That's why, children, for example, have that sponge-like brain where it's easier for them to learn things because they've got fewer things that they identify with, fewer things that they're connected to, and therefore they have fewer limitations, children. And as we grow up and really reach adolescence and become young men and young women and so on and so forth, we start to cling on to more and more experiences. We start to buy more things. We start to have more responsibilities, and therefore we start to have more attachments, and our sense of identity strengthens as we get older. That's why after the age of 35, many people become a set of memorized patterns, beliefs, and so on and so forth. And that's why they find it so much harder to change. But we can do that by stimulating and activating neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. And I've spoke about that previously, so I'm not going to necessarily go into so much detail as it relates to those avenues. But it is something that we can do to really change our beliefs, to really restructure, rewire our brain, to become more intelligent, more energetic, more deeper, more aware in life, and therefore more conscious. So what we have to understand is that we are not what we accumulate. We are not what we accomplish in our lives. Yes, our certificates, our degrees, our jobs, our status, our power. We need to be able to detach from these things, these labels, these forms of identification, if we are to live abundantly, if we are to develop that deeper level of consciousness that's going to truly enable us to be freer, more tranquil, more serene, more complete, more whole, more united, and therefore to suffer less. So the more you accomplish, the more you achieve, and the more you connect and associate with these accomplishments, the more suffering you're going to acquire. It's really sad, and it's quite ironic in many ways as well. So we are more meaningful than the things that we accomplish in this physical dimension, and we are more than our conditioned consciousness, our personality, our identity. We need to rise above this. We are not separate, exclusive identities. We are more connected than we can ever imagine. And that's what happens when we begin to associate ourselves, because we kind of limit the people we can connect with, and also who we can become. Because think of it like this way, okay? People feel connected to people they deem to be similar to, yeah? This is what built the art of building rapport is. This is why we copy each other's body language, our gestures, our tonality, these sort of things as a means of building rapport. So what I'm saying is the more identifications, the more you are able to connect to certain labels, the more you become dissimilar. So let me give you a few examples, okay? So let's pretend I'm a female now. By being a female, I'm therefore less connected to all the men in the world, okay? Let's say I am let's say that I am a fitness instructor. I therefore become less connected to people who are not in the fitness industry. Okay. Let's also say that I am a 40-year-old woman who's works in the fitness industry. I'm therefore going to be less connected to anyone who is of a different age and stage in life than myself. Let's also say that, I went through a divorce as well. I'm therefore going to be less connected to people who are married and who are living harmoniously together in partnerships and so on and so forth, romantically. And let's also say that I'm from Morocco, right? I'm therefore going to be less connected to people who are not born and from Morocco, or at least people who've never visited Morocco or understand the cultures and so on and so forth. And you understand, this is how it works, guys. The more labels we have, the more attachments we have, the more achievements we have, the more exclusive, significant and different we think we are. And therefore, the less connected we become to other people. And thus the world. We begin to think that we're different to nature. We're different to birds and bears and tigers and water and mountains and the sea and the sun. And we become disconnected. And this is where illness stems from. Illness stems from the ego. Illness stems out of fear, and ego stems out of stress. And we can easily change that by becoming more connected to developing the unconditioned consciousness where we don't limit ourselves, where we live more freely. And it's all about love, joy, presence, giving and sharing. And this is where we really thrive in life. And this is really the aim of this podcast, to kind of open our eyes to what we are capable of being. And to stop being limited by our own conditioned consciousness, really. So yes, we're much larger than this. And many people do get confused with this, which is why, and I'll touch upon this later, why people suffer for so long in their entire lives, because they never awaken. They live within this illusory world, in their mind-forged thought systems of who they are, what they represent, and all their limiting beliefs that derive from thinking in such ways. So yes, we must rise above this conditioned consciousness of wanting more and never feeling full. And the more we chase things, the less we actually arrive, ironically again. And instead we want, because this is a superficial connection, guys, when we think we're special and different and unique. And when we only associate with this physical world, it is a superficial, illusory world that we kind of have orchestrated within our own minds and that we try to live up to, because our beliefs are just a record of the past and what we have experienced thus far and what we associate with. And therefore our own beliefs are limited because we limit ourselves. Because of we only believe in what we see, for instance, and these sort of things. We're more connected to the visible world rather than the invisible things, which I think are more beautiful and blissful and limitless. But I'll leave that to your suggestions as well. So I mean, we all experience universal traits. We all eat, sleep, have sex, laugh, cry, die, live, breathe. All these sorts of commonalities exist amongst us, and this is why we're more connected than we could ever fathom. This is why it's so bewildering, why there's so much suffering and wars and battles that take place, and people take things too seriously, and they claim to have bigger victims, and it's very weird how people feel more connected if they have the same common enemy. And it's just really unusual ideologies, that universal ideologies that have been created and as a consequence of the ego, for instance. So ironically, we actually become more extraordinary by doing simpler things. So some basic principles and routines, physical activities such as meditation, exercise, gratefulness, loving, doing the things we enjoy, creating flow, abundant states, being inspired and astonished in life, and being inquisitive and really interested in things in life, in the most simplest things in life. This is the way to really be full. This is the way to truly be peaceful. And sadly, many people misconceive this, and instead they, like I said, they search to become different and complicated, and they make themselves more complicated. And you can see it in all things that we do in life, guys. You can, people with the more wardrobes, more clothes, more jewelry, more shoes, more trainers. It's never enough for these people, and therefore they're never going to be happy long term, because there's always going to be something new, guys. And the same thing for technology and making sure you get the right amount of attention from people in certain situations and feeling significant. And people try to achieve significance in a multitude of different ways. I mean, even not trying to be significant in a way is claiming significance, right? And clinging on to any kind of belief. And if you're married to any kind of beliefs that you have, then really it's your ego at play here, and it's your ego that is dictating things. And it doesn't need to be this way. And in many ways, I'll give the metaphor of the emptiest can is the one that makes the most noise. And the same applies to people. People who shout, do their best to get attention. People who are dramatic, are stressed. People who create stress in other people's lives and fuel this negative energy, vibration, if you will. These are the people who have the least, who are most dictated by their egoic mind. These are the people who are most limited. These are the people who actually suffer most, regardless of how physically beautiful they may be, regardless of how much wealth or money they might have and how they accumulated these in the first place. These things are innocuous. It's not important at all. What's more important is who we become and where we're coming from, as in where our energy, when we create things, where are we creating from? And I'm going to talk about that more in more detail a bit later. And what we have to understand is that our very soul, our very being is miserable when we limit and label ourselves, and when we identify with the mind and our thoughts, and we have that compulsive, addictive thinking that goes on in our mind of, this is who I am, I hate that person, this person, I need to get revenge on this person, I made mistakes in my presentations, or I made mistakes in my work or the project, and they're going to think less of me now. And when we get bogged down in this kind of high beta brainwave states, this is where most suffering derives from, really. So, I mean, what we have to understand is that whenever we have to be right, and whenever people are being stubborn and we feel like we have to win something, it is the ego at play here. And we need to rise above this, and we need to, and being present and enjoying the simplest things in life and staying open-minded, experiencing new things and being awakened by appreciating the simpler things in life, by being more present, not putting as much pressure and stress on oneself. This is how we're going to really thrive and make the most of our time here in this physical realm. So yes, be curious, be inquisitive, learn more, be a lifelong learner, share what you know, share your gifts, share your time, share your money in as many different ways as you can. And that's what's going to free us, guys. That's what's going to create the kind of abundance that we truly seek and that we claim to want to be and feel. So yes, focus on growing, focus on expanding, and therefore focus on the more beautiful, blissful things in life. And we need to look beyond what we have been programmed to become. And yes, the way we think is a choice. The way we feel is a choice. Our actions, our behaviors are all, the majority of them are conditioned, as I outlined earlier. And we can change these things. And it's going to take patience, and it's going to take a lot of silence, some self-reflecting and learning from people who have been there, done that, achieved the sort of things that you want to achieve. It's going to take a lot more discipline on your part. It's going to take stimulating neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, like I outlined earlier. It's going to involve stepping outside of your comfort zone, which is key here, because you won't be able to change and create a deeper level of consciousness if you keep doing and thinking in the same sort of ways. And 90% of your thoughts are the same as the previous day. And that tends to be the case because people keep doing the same sort of things every single day, and they keep drinking from the same sort of mugs and eating the same kind of foods and doing the same kind of physical activities every single day, and driving to the same places and traveling to the same destinations on holidays and all the time, doing the same sort of things. Nothing will change if we keep doing the same things and seeing the same things and so on. Okay. And this is key here. So we live within all kinds of bodies throughout our lives, and I want to continue with this because, the body that we had when we were children is different to the body we had as teenagers and going through puberty, and the body that we have as young adults and when our hormones are thriving and when we are in our best physical shape of our lives, and the body that we have in our 40s is different to the body that we have in our 50s, 60s, 70s and so on. And when we're on our deathbed, we have and we live within we temporarily stay in these different bodies, and these different bodies are not us, and we can't become emotionally connected to our physical body, because otherwise we're going to meet a great deal of crisis and suffering when our beauty, when our best physical shape or physical form long passes us, and it's our duty, it's our obligation to rise above what we can physically see, like I said before. And instead we need to operate from something that's more unlimited, our very being, our aliveness, our oneness, our energy. What we have to understand is, not one physical cell exists in your body from 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. Okay, we're constantly changing, we're constantly regenerating, we're constantly learning new things, becoming new things, restoring things, developing. 50% of your memories are actually not even the truth. It's because our brains are changing, the way we perceive things are changing. It's kind of like playing that game Chinese Whispers, where if someone tells you a story, every time you hear a story, it slightly changes each time. And this is how our memories operate as well. And so even the things that we assume to be our truth, where our beliefs derive from the record of the past, and all the things we've done over our lifetime, those things are inaccurate as well. So we can't even trust our memories, which is why we can't live in the past anymore. And we have to rise above the past, and we have to rise above our own ego. And there is the highest self in every single one of us. There's a spark within us that can grow until we have a realization. There are oftentimes breakthrough moments, and I write about this extensively in my book, The Art of Power, Happiness and Success, which you can get at Amazon. You can also get it at my store at www.alexgemstore.com. And in my book, I write about how there are many signs in our lives, and more signs will show up to people who are dominated by their own ego. And the more we are run by our ego, the less we self-reflect, the more mistakes we're going to make, the more we're going to sabotage our successes, the more we're going to create pain and actually attract pain in our lives. Because we have this kind of tunnel vision, if you will, and we limit ourselves in terms of what we can perceive, and we only see through that blurry vision that the ego provides us with, that limited vision, if you will. And, there will often be signs in life that will kind of metaphorically punch you in the face until you learn to duck and move and change your perceptions, change your consciousness. Like, have you ever known someone, for example, who kept getting into the same kind of relationships and kept getting the same inevitable negative outcomes, or someone who kept getting into accidents, who seemed to be clumsy and these sort of things? Or have you ever known someone who kept attracting negative things, or kept getting fired from their position, their work, or they never really kind of made things work in their lives, or any of these sort of things? It's because you'll keep meeting more and more resistance, more and more pain. You'll keep accumulating more and more disastrous consequences in your life until you make that shift. Now, a lot of people like me, I made the shift. I created the shift because I understand these things, because I really appreciate studying consciousness, spirituality, changing one's subconscious program, studying neuroscience, studying NLP, studying how the brain works, learning from my experiences, learning from my mistakes, learning to become a leader, developing my own emotional intelligence, and all these really important things. But, there are people out there who do not take time to learn about these things. There are people out there who do not appreciate these ideologies, these perceptions that geniuses have had over hundreds and hundreds of years, and instead their own ego, they think they're bigger and better, and they don't need to learn these sort of things. And that's why they don't spot signs. For example, arguments in a relationship, they don't detach and start to think about what's causing this. They're not taking responsibility. They're not doing different things. And this is why arguments keep getting worse and worse, and eventually lead to divorce and all these sorts of problems. And the same thing at work, in the workplace. You could be an employee and you make a few mistakes here and then. The mistakes you make at work get worse and worse and worse. And if you don't learn from the mistakes that you're making, you'll eventually get warnings and get fired in the workplace. And this happens in every aspect. It happens within our health. I know countless people who I'm helping to overcome type 2 diabetes, their like obesity issues, chronic inflammation, all these sorts of things. It's because they're not making the relevant changes when they're seeing the deterioration of their health. They're not intervening at the right times. They're waiting until they're told they've only got a few weeks to live, for example, or they're now going to have to live by doing certain things. That's going to be the only method of keeping them alive and breathing. And some people just don't change because they are immersed in their ego, because they're not learning, and they're fixed within the egoic conditioned consciousness. And it takes work, and you can only help someone who wants to be helped. And that's just the way it is. We cannot control someone else's behavior. It's not within our control. No matter how persuasive we are, if someone does not want to change, you're not going to be able to help them. But we all have that. We all have this godlike presence within us, this loving presence within us. It's just that we cover it up with possessions, with luxuries, with fakeness and falsities, and all these sorts of things. And we suppress that love, that godlike presence, that oneness, if you will, that deeper level of consciousness within us all, because we become addicted to our own fake uniqueness. And we don't want to be rendered powerless by our own thoughts, and people do become limited by their own thought forms and their own ways, their own mental emotional patterns. So listen, don't believe in every single thought that comes into your mind, because there's such a thing known as collective consciousness, and that simply means that all our energies in the world, amongst people, amongst cultures and so on and so forth, we put out the same kind of energy field, and at that collective energy field is what forces us to think in certain ways, and whether we like these certain ways of thinking or not, it's the way it's been inbuilt through our society. So we do not have to believe every thought that we have, and many of our thoughts derive from our primitive brain and our unconscious trying to keep us safe and doing what we already know out of fear. So we are not all of our thoughts. If you have a negative thought, then it's not you. If you have a thought that you are not proud, that you don't like, then you have to understand that that's not who you are. That's something that's popped into your mind because of a multitude of different reasons, to be honest with you. Could be from external events, collective consciousness, like I just outlined. It could be because you're knocked out of homeostasis due to excessive stress or what have you, and therefore your neurotransmitters are not operating optimally, and you're operating from survival mode, and excessive production of norepinephrine and epinephrine. It's kind of making you imbalanced, restless, irritable, and all these sorts of things, which can influence your thinking and so on and so forth. So we have to be aware of these things. And just like I want you, as it relates to your thinking, your thoughts, I'm going to give you another analogy, because metaphors and figurative language is very powerful, a great way of learning, embedding messages. So I want you to think of like a factory that produces whatever, phones or computers or any kind of product or technological product, or any kind of any kind of product that requires packaging and these sort of things. I want you to imagine a factory where these products are on that I forget what you call it, but like a line, if you will, and it's moving around, and different machines are adding different things to this product. And I want you to perceive these different products as being your thoughts. And sometimes you're going to have negative thoughts, and they're going to be goods that are damaged and not as high quality as others, and you're just going to have to let them pass by, and just don't be emotionally attached to these thoughts, because like I said, they're not you. And even positive thoughts I want you to remain detached from, because if you attach to your positive thoughts, then you're going to always attach to your negative thoughts as well. So you need to constantly be detached. You need to become the observer, the watcher of your own thinking, your own thoughts, and to always question, especially your negative thinking here, always question the validity of the thoughts that are going in your mind, and see if you can connect where it has arisen from, as a means of identifying your patterns and therefore being able to change them over time. So, yes, that's how I want you to begin to analyze your own thinking. So be careful of when you use the pronoun I. I am, because when people use this language, I'm touching on NLP here and the language in which we use, we command ourselves into a destiny. We teach ourselves the way we are now, and it also projects the way we're going to live in the future. So if you say, I am clumsy, or I am unintelligent, or I am awful, or I'm a bad person, or I am lonely, or I'm no good, or I'm not enough, or I'm not smart enough, whatever it is. These words are very, very powerful. And again, whenever you hear I am and so on and so forth, it oftentimes connects to our egoic consciousness. We oftentimes limit ourselves by labeling ourselves. So just be very cautious when you're using the words I am and when you use it, and start to question how it kind of limits you, perhaps. So instead of using things like I am a rich person, or I am an awful human being, or whatever it might be, I want you to start using things like I am love. So rather than thinking, I am the most important, significant person in my neighborhood, or in my city, or in my country, or in the world, instead use statements and imperatives such as, declaratives such as, I am God, for example, or I am bliss, or I am present, or I am aware, I am awakened, I am enlightened, I am giving. These kind of, if you are going to use I ams, make sure you use them more positively and thoughtfully. So we don't want to be reactive, we don't want to be emotional, we don't want to be followers, we don't want to operate at low vibrations. We instead want to take ownership of our energy and what we create. So we have to gravitate to this deeper level of consciousness. So we want to connect with the source within ourselves, rather than looking externally to find meaningless things to distract us as a means of self-sabotage, procrastination, being reactive and emotional, like I outlined. So be very conscious of what you pay attention to. Be very conscious of what you focus on. Be very conscious of what you think about every single day. And what these kind of thought patterns reveal to you about yourself and your relationship with the world, or with people, with objects and things, and so on and so forth. So, like I was touching on earlier, when I was talking about signs, and how a lot of people oftentimes have a lot of signs arise in their life. And if we don't pay attention to these signs, then the mistakes, the events, the incidents in our lives will become more and more disastrous and detrimental to one's health. And we have to understand that sometimes for some people, unfortunately, it needs to take a massive fall. So I want you to imagine like climbing up a cliff. People who are really egotistical, they think they're better than others, they think they're more powerful, they think they're smarter, they think they're this, they think they're more attractive. So their hill, their mountain, whatever you want to use visually, is higher and higher and higher than other people, because they've built themselves up in this false, illusory world of their own. And therefore, their fall, when they do inevitably fall, and we all get humbled and taught valuable lessons in life, whether by other people or by God or spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, karma. The more egotistical we are, the worse our fall will be. So it's kind of like saying the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I'm sure you've heard that idiom before, and it definitely rings true here. So the more we big ourselves up, the more highly we think we are that over others, the more suffering we will endure, and the more signs will have come our way. So unfortunately, many people don't learn from the signs. However, a great source of enlightenment and feeling awakened often occurs when people do reach that threshold, when they're, I'm sure you've heard stories, or maybe you know someone who seem to have everything in their lives. They feel significant. They have a lot of money. They're maybe famous. They're adored by many, many people. And, they maybe take their life, or they become extremely depressed or addicted to illicit drugs or alcohol or something like this as a coping mechanisms to kind of change their state, because they're really unhappy with themselves and their circumstance. And why does this happen? It happens because the ego can no more protect them anymore. They've created their own monster, if you will, by connecting to their own ego and their limited consciousness. And sometimes, hopefully, people will kind of learn from these really painful experiences where they're on the brink of like committing suicide, perhaps. And, a lot of people are able to make that shift last minute. It's like turning the car before you crash. And a lot of people, unfortunately, take their lives unnecessarily because they were unable to step out of their ego. They were unable to become the observer of their own mind. They were unable to be present and to detach from their own physical identity in their physical form. So we want to. One of the methods to overcoming this is to practice giving things away, not just our possessions, but everything, our energy, our time, our focus, our attention. We're like sharing your gifts with others is a skill. Like one of the reasons why I developed the love and passion to share all the things I know is because I know how it helps people, and I didn't want. Because sometimes when you create new things, you have that imposter syndrome. You're like, who are you? You're not good enough. Why are you going to share this content? Who's going to listen to you? Or, what makes you think you know enough in order to do this or that? And instead, when you just create and you share things purely because you want to help people and you're doing it out of love, then wonderful, blissful things will happen. And that's it's a shame if you have gifts and you never share it to the world. That's a massive, massive crime that a lot of people commit, really. So there's nothing more freeing and blissful than doing things for others, regardless of your status, reputation, level of authority, or perceived power, for example. At any moment, we can either be operating more within our form identity. Our mind functions through our history, through our achievements, through our failures, through concepts of the self, who we are, how we validate ourselves, and all these sort of things. So instead, we want to live from that aware presence. We want to live from that essence of identity and that unconditioned consciousness that I'll talk about. We want to be free from our conceptual self and simply live from that aware, more blissful state. And we want to remove identification with our thought forms. And we need to step aside and be the observer of our thoughts, like I've said. Because, eventually the ego causes so much self-destruction that we're simply forced to awaken, like I said earlier. And oftentimes the ego does exist and persist to keep us from seeing the truth of our real existence. The fact that we're more connected, we're more one, we're more vulnerable, we're more open and loving than we ever imagined. And this can be very difficult for people because they lose their safety net, if you will. Their ego functions to be their safety net. And instead, we're forced to change. Many people are forced to change when we reach crisis, that breakthrough point. So what I want you to understand is that greed itself and always needing more, wanting more is really a dysfunctional program. It's just that because so many people live from that, we think it's the usual. We think it's appropriate. We think that's the way that we need to live. But it's definitely not. It certainly isn't. And we don't want to be sheep. We don't want to be followers. We want to understand our priorities, what's important in our lives, and just focus on being good quality human beings who don't criticize and judge others and ourselves for that matter. And what we have to understand is who we are right now is infinite. We're divine. The way we are right now is more than enough to accomplish and achieve the things that we want. We don't need more. We just need a deeper level of consciousness, really. We just need to live from this awakened place of unconditioned consciousness, where we operate above the tangible world, the physical world that we sometimes get lost in. Okay, and that's one of our biggest struggles. So yes, you can change your circumstance. You can change your life. You can change your level of consciousness, and you can do it immediately. You can change. You don't have to wait for a key moment in your life where you've suffered enough and you have that awakeness and where you're forced to kind of change. Instead, you can create it, and you don't need a magical event to take place in order to start living more peacefully, abundantly, and operating at that deeper level of consciousness. We just need to be present, okay? And we must learn to accept how we feel. And sometimes, like I said earlier, we need to create the space for newness, for novelty, for more positivity, and for experiences to just take over. And if we ever experience sadness or agitation or impatience or frustration or jealousy or anger or nervousness or anxiety, any of these negative emotions, I mean, there's no need to disparage and belittle oneself. All you need to do really is disassociate from the experience and just let it float by, because nothing stays the same. Things are always changing. So if you don't like a certain thing that you're experiencing, or you're getting angry or nervous, or you hate something or someone, just step back, calm your circuitry, let the emotion pass you by, be present, and trust me, your emotional state will change. And you'll begin to attract a more blissful state, because presence kills negativity. Presence kills harmful emotions. We have to understand this. So pay attention to what's happening around you. Pay attention to how you think and feel. Pay attention. Be astonished by the beauty, the bewilderment of the world, of just living, and we become so comfortable with the fact that we drive vehicles, that we can fly on airplanes, that we can use these incredible telephones, simply because we're used to it. It's called the law of familiarity. And the only reason we're used to ourselves is because we lived in this body. I know it's changing. The body is always changing, but it's familiar. And therefore, we take it for granted. Whatever's familiar, we learn to take for granted over time. So this is why it's important to continuously learn, so that you become aware of when you might be falling into familiarity, into your comfort zone, and therefore into egoic thinking. So we become what we focus our attention on. And the silence between the notes is what makes the music, essentially, to paraphrase from Claude Debussy. And also the space between our thoughts is really the beauty that exists. It's not the thoughts ourselves that make us happy, more peaceful, more tranquil, more conscious. It's actually the stillness, the peace, the tranquility. It's the space between our thoughts where we are able to create. If you think about brainwave states, we're most creative and more amazing during gamma brainwave state, and especially alpha brainwave state. This is where our creative centers flourish, where our subconscious opens, where we're able to act out of love and act out of peace, and yet be still very alert and focused on what we're doing. And that's a beautiful state, and that's what we should be encouraging ourselves to experience as often as possible, really. Yeah, so, we all have different degrees of ego. It's impossible to eradicate the ego. I want you to understand that, okay? So there are different versions of the ego, and, the extreme ego is when people simply do not know that the ego exists at all. They do not know about different types of consciousness. They just live their own lives, and they live and they die, and they never realize, they never awaken, they never become enlightened, they are never self-actualized, because they've always operated from this very basic, limited, egoic, compulsive thought forms. And these are actually the people who actually need to learn about the ego most, because they incur the most suffering. They accumulate all kinds of mental and physical illnesses throughout their lives. They incur and create and attract all kinds of negativity and painful experiences. And they don't even know that they're doing it, because they're so unaware of the kind of things that I'm talking to you about in this podcast. So yes, instead of forcing things, which is if you're ever forcing something to happen, it's your ego is at play. So instead, let yourself be guided and taken by how you feel. And I want to also, now that we're slowly coming to a close here, I want to also share with you the difference between being motivated and being inspired. Because if you're going to live from this deeper level of consciousness, you have to understand the two and be able to catch yourself and identify which one's taking control of you. So motivation occurs when we are personally taking something. It requires a level of force on our part, and you feel like you want to do something, or you have to do something. You're kind of forcing the action. You're forcing the progress, if you will. So motivation is therefore ego generated. You're pushing to make this. I want you to imagine pushing Okay, so motivation means to push, to meet resistance, something that's unnatural. Now, you can still accomplish a lot and be very successful in this physical, limited life through motivation alone. But I want you to understand the discrepancies between the two. Because conversely, inspiration happens to us. It's something that takes hold of us. It takes us to where we were intended to go. We are not in control of the destination when we are inspired. We are in control when we're motivated, but we lose control when we're inspired. And the lack of control is actually, ironically, gives us more control. And I want you to understand that. So inspiration occurs when we are being pulled. So motivation is when we are pushing and we meet resistance, like lifting weights, for example. And inspiration occurs when we're being pulled, when we're utilizing leverage, when we're not the ones forcing anything to happen. It's all about synchronicity, really, when things kind of merge and mesh together congruently to lead to coherence. And it's about being pulled. It happens when you are connected to, like I said earlier, the source, God, spirit, oneness, whatever you want to call it. So inspiration is the channel connecting something special to others. So we are the channel. When you accomplish something, if you are inspired, then you recognize that there was something greater taking over. You receive some kind of external support, whether it's some greater intelligence or some energies or some momentum or some luck, some fortitude that you kind of attracted during the creation of something. That's when you know that you're acting out of inspiration. Okay, whereas when you're motivated, the ego is at play, and you can tell if the ego is at play is if you think you're the special thing creating or doing something, or if you want the attention on you and not the actual process itself. That's how you can tell the difference between motivation and inspiration. So yes, I mean, never be attached to the outcome. If you're attached to the outcome, then you're living by the ego, and instead we need to enjoy the process, the art of doing. The present moment must always be more important than the actual results. Otherwise, the ego is clearly dictating our course of action, and therefore we will incur a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, a lot of negativity, a lot of unnecessary mistakes, and so on and so forth. So God, love, that deeper level of consciousness operates when we act out of love and act out of gratefulness and abundance. So your attention must be on what you are doing now. You cannot be doing something yet be focusing on the result and what it will mean to you and what people will think of you when you have finished something. Nothing is ever finished anyways, because it's always a continuous flow, seamless flow of things in life. And we want our mind to transcend limitations. And when we do so and we start operating in this area, our own consciousness will expand, because we're creating, we're doing things, not to achieve a certain thing, but for the sake of what it means to us, because it gives us so much joy. We experience so much flow. We experience so much love. We know how it affects people, and therefore we're creating out of love. We're creating out of something far more deeper and meaningful. So dormant forces will come actually to come and support you synchronistically because of our energy, because of our purpose, because of our love, and because of our presence. And that's how I want us to end this podcast. So start questioning why you do things throughout the day. Start questioning your own thought forms, and start living more abundantly, more openly, more lovingly as a means of creating. Okay, so yes, as I mentioned earlier, you may want to get my book, The Art of Power, Happiness and Success. You can get it at my website, www.alexgemstore.com. You can also get it at Amazon, so please help yourself. Feel free to do so. You might want to join me at my course. Yes, all you need to do, my elite course, you just go to my website, www.alexgem.com, click where it says join PHS course today, enter your credit card details. You'll gain instant access to this elite course that's going to develop your mindset, make you more tranquil, make you more present, make you more joyous, enable you to experience flow more, to help you with your purpose, to help you focus. There's nothing wrong with having goals in your life. That's a beautiful thing, as long as you're not emotionally connected to the outcomes. Enjoy working towards accomplishing your goals, and I can help you do so with this course as well. Amazing bonuses given as well, hours of exclusive video footage, podcast material, and audio segments to keep you on track, to make you more positive, to develop your self-esteem, to make you feel more whole, more complete, more loving, to help you to support others and be a great role model for yourself and for others. People notice massive improvements in terms of their energy levels, their productivity, their ability to perform, their ability to become happier, more positive, enlightened beings through this course. I also give several ebooks as bonuses that are worth $50 each. Really incredible, really insightful, helping you be more conscious, helping you make a difference in this world and to put things into perspective. So you're going to love this course. You might want to join me at the Power Mastermind that I do. If you cannot work with me live, massive shame. I've actually turned the Power Mastermind into a course though. You can also get that at my site, the Power Mastermind virtual version, where you can learn and go through these incredible worksheets and activities that's taken me over 15 years to orchestrate, to put together, from thousands of hours of learning from my own mentorship, thousands of hours and pounds that I've invested in my own personal development, and that's included in this course. Really tremendous. Also, amazing bonuses given in the Power Mastermind virtual version as well. So go check that out, see if it's for you, and have a great day. Look after yourself, stay strong, stay present, and I'll see you soon. Take care.